How's it going, everybody? Steve from Broken Galaxy here, and welcome to this week's episode of Push Start to Listen, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. And I'm going to be straight up with y'all. It was a light week this week. I was scraping everything I could possibly think of to come up with some stuff to talk about. I got a few things, and I think they'll provide some interesting conversation, so why don't we get right into it? Probably the biggest news this week was that Sony released the first major firmware update for the PlayStation 5. It adds a few things here to deal with like party chat and some features that are coming to the PlayStation mobile app, but kind of the big takeaway here is it's now allowing cold storage of PlayStation 5 games. What that means, if you're not familiar with the term, is that you can save games that you aren't playing on your PS5 to an external USB hard drive. You cannot play the games from the USB hard drive, and that's because since the PlayStation has that proprietary solid-state hard drive in it of the M.2 variety, you have to have that to be able to run the games. The games are designed to utilize that. They can't use a slower storage system like a USB external hard drive. So that makes sense. I get it. Having the extra space is definitely nice. I don't have too much on my PS5, and I'm probably more than halfway full on the system storage. You don't get that much to begin with. Just like when you buy like a new laptop or a new computer and it comes with Windows pre-installed, you always lose some space because Windows obviously has to take up some of its own files. Even on like blank thumb drives, you don't get necessarily the entire 32 gigs or 64 gigs or whatever it is. There's always kind of some stuff taken for setup purposes and things like that. So that's completely understandable, but the PlayStation 5 takes a large chunk of your hard drive for kind of system files and whatever else it kind of needs to be able to run the system itself. They say that the ability to install your own M.2 solid-state hard drive into the system to expand upon the 1 terabyte that comes with the system is coming. I guess rumors have been saying, this year, maybe this summer. It's entirely possible it's this year. I don't see why that's, an out of an ordinary thing to say. It's not like a wild rumor that doesn't sound like it couldn't possibly be true. It's going to be tough, though. I think a lot of people are going to see the price on what that's going to be and maybe shy away from it a little bit. I mean, you look at the price for the external storage, not external because you can install it inside, but that extra storage you can add to the Xbox Series X and how expensive that is. But when you really think about it, a 1 terabyte solid-state hard drive is not super cheap. I should reiterate, a 1 terabyte M.2 style solid-state hard drive is not cheap. They're a couple $100 at least. You can get a regular solid-state hard drive for much less than that. I think I paid about $100 for the last 1 terabyte SSD that I purchased for my computer. This is kind of the world we live in, You want to have that super speed with no loading times and take advantage of all those features. Costs money. It costs quite a bit of money. And it kind of becomes a tough sell because at least with a computer, while it costs so much more money, it's, you can hook up as many hard drives as you want theoretically to your computer and be perfectly fine with it. With a PlayStation, there's no external M.2 drive. It's not like you can just buy one and plug it into a USB port on the system. It's got to install internally to the system. And I mean, available to consumers at an affordable price, you kind of max out at 2 terabytes, and those are expensive. Those are in the $400 to $500 range. They're almost as much as a system. So I love the ability to be able to put games into cold storage that you aren't going to use immediately. You can copy them back over to the system. It's been a little vague on whether or not those games will patch if they're in cold storage on an external drive. I've heard people say yes. I've heard people say no. I couldn't see a definitive answer. I'm going to go maybe stray on the side of caution and don't automatically assume that they're going to, and just, be happy if they do. It'd be a nice little bonus. But I mean, it's nice to see that Sony is making some forward progress. It's great and all, and it's a cool thing to have. And, I'm sure some of the other features are great for the people that use them, but I'm still having issues when I start my PS5 where sometimes games say they randomly don't install. They don't install. I had Miles Morales, a physical disc, installed to the system. It was the first game I installed on the system, aside from the game that came with the system, Astrobot. I played through the game. I beat it. I took the disc out, obviously. I played another game. The game was still installed to the system. I never deleted it. My wife asked to try Miles Morales. cool, no problem. I eject the disc that's in the system, grab the Miles Morales disc, put it in, and it said that it was completely deleted off the system and it needed to reinstall. Like, no idea how that possibly happened. Like, I haven't, aside to look to see how much hard drive space I have after installing the few games I have not deleted anything off the system. It was kind of wild. I still have issues where I turn the system on and the UI just doesn't load. Like, you go to like the store tab and there's just nothing there. It's just blank squares. And sometimes the squares aren't even there. Like, the outline of the square doesn't even show up. It's just nothing. I'd like to see that stuff get fixed. That's the real things that are, that and like the issues with like the remote play. People having problems not remote play, the rest mode. People having issues where you let your system be in a rest mode and it just crashes the system. It screws your games up. I've heard people like losing saves, losing game installs, stuff like that. Like, those are the real issues that Sony needs to be focusing on. So until they start doing that stuff, I'm going to just be like, okay, these little tweaks here and there, these little additions, they're nice, but they're not what we really need, Last year, Electronic Arts bought Codemasters, the makers of the F1 series of racing games that come out every year based on the real F1 driving series. This year's entry is getting a story mode, something that EA has kind of been putting into their games here and there. Madden's got one called Long Shot. I know the NHL games recently, I believe, have them. FIFA had them. I don't know if they still have them every year. I haven't played an NHL game in a couple years, and I haven't played a FIFA in maybe 3 to 4. NBA 2K, which is not made by EA, but they have a very touted story mode every year. They've like recruited people like LeBron James's media company to do it. Spike Lee did it one year, and they've been okay here and there. Some of them are absolutely terrible, but as somebody that plays a lot of sports games, it's cool to have. Sports games can get repetitive. You're just playing the game, you're driving the race, it's just the same thing over and over again. And for people like me that are super into stuff like franchise mode, we have to play a lot of the game in our head. You're forcing us to kind of make up narratives in our mind where the game is kind of lacking in those directions. And some games have excellent franchise modes. In terms of sports franchise modes, I don't think anybody touches NBA 2K's. The amount of options you have, just the ability to click on a player and say, hey, find me a team that's willing to trade for him. Like, that is such a lifesaver. It makes things so much easier. And it's those quality of life improvements that really set that game apart from others. I think a racing game getting a story mode can be really cool. There's been some great movies that have had that. Rush, which told I believe that's the Niki Lauda movie. Even the campy, cheesy Sylvester Stallone racing movie called Driven, shows kind of the high tension stakes of racing at over 200 miles per hour. It's great fodder for a story, just like, how many great boxing movies have we had? We've had great baseball movies. I think it's awesome that Codemasters is taking a step out of the box, so to speak, and, putting some effort into this. It could be something that draws new fans in. I mean, I don't follow F1. I know enough about it that I understand the mechanics of the racing. I've watched some F1 racing in my life. I don't anticipate buying the game, but if reviews come out and say like, hey, this story mode is awesome, that would get me to buy the game and potentially become a fan of F1. I'm sure that's a minority case. That's not going to be most people that are going to respond to that. Some people will just be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe the game goes on sale and curiosity gets the better of them and they pick it up. But hey, anything you can do to a sports game to make it just more than playing that sport or driving that car or whatever it may be, that's a win in my book. So something to keep an eye on this summer. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with this. I wasn't kidding when I said it was a light week. We're at our final story for this week, and that's that last weekend during WrestleMania, 2K Games announced WWE 2K22, and why this is a big deal is because last year they didn't make a WWE game. WWE 2K20 was so bad, so just riddled with bugs, so many issues with that game, audio problems, graphical problems, gameplay problems, that they said, we're going to take a year off. Last year, they did do WWE Battlegrounds, which was more of an arcadey style game, not the full sim like most wrestling games we're used to are. And it didn't get great reviews, but I guess it gave WWE something to put out and something to market, towards the fall and towards the holidays to try and sell. The game's been out since, I think it came out in October. WWE games typically come out in October. That's when I would assume WWE 2K22 is coming out. Battlegrounds being out in October. Let's see, it's April. So what, we're at 6 months, 7 months. That game is already, I've seen it on sale for $20 or less. So, I mean, it wasn't a big seller. They had a lot of DLC. That game was like really riddled with microtransactions and just wasn't a game that needed to be. I want to see what they do. The trailer that I'm playing to the side, obviously this is like, they're trying to make this game look as good as they possibly can. We'll see what it actually looks like in motion. I will say, though, those graphics, I mean, those look like PS5 and Xbox Series X graphics. We've heard enough stories about studios saying, hey, it is really difficult for us to simultaneously develop a PS5 and PS4 version, an Xbox Series X and an Xbox Series One version. Maybe they just cut their losses. And obviously the market of PS5 owners and Xbox Series X owners isn't as big as it could be or probably should have been at this point due to a lot of mitigating factors in the world. Maybe it's enough for them to be like, you know what, let's just put it out on the next gen systems or current gen systems at this point and hope for the best. That game needs a serious overhaul. Having it being a yearly release, and I'm sure that's what WWE wants, and I'm sure honestly that's what 2K wants. The developers, though, I'm sure they would probably like some time to make some changes. There are animations in that game that date back to the PS2 version of those games. Obviously, as new wrestlers come onto the scene, new moves get added to the game, but some wrestling moves are used by every wrestler or, a large majority of the wrestlers, and there's not a super, incentive to update those animations, and some of them really need to be. They don't look quite as smooth as other parts of the game. So it's really weird when you're playing as a character and you execute a move and it looks like pure garbage, and then the next one looks like, oh wow, that's like super fluid, and you can tell that they actually had two people in motion capture suits like executing those moves. Famously WWE 2K games have hired independent wrestlers to provide both voiceovers and also motion capture for moves, motion capture for entrances, mimicking the real life wrestlers, because typically in a normal year, where they would be out touring all over the world, you can't lock them down for a long period of time to get those guys to actually do their moves and actually do their entrances. Not to mention, I'm sure there's a liability risk. What if one of the wrestlers got hurt during a motion capture situation? I'm sure that would not be great on either end for either party. But, it's kind of their game to lose here. They've got the ball. You've had more time to make this game than you have had to make any previous game in your franchise. It's up to them to show that, like, hey, we can actually do this, because a lot of developers out of 2K, not Visual Concepts, but 2K and Ukes, who was making the games, they always say, like, oh, if we just had a little bit more time, there's always so many things we have to cut from the games. Like, hopefully now they've had the time to do that. And honestly, if they come out of the gate just with a huge dud again, I don't think they're going to lose the license. I don't think WWE pulls it, because there's enough wrestling fans, enough WWE diehard fans that will buy the game regardless. It's not enough for them to drop the license, but it could potentially be enough for somebody somewhere in WWE corporate to be like, hey, this isn't selling as much. Why is it not selling as much? Doing some research and finding out, like, oh, nobody really likes playing the game anymore. Maybe we should find somebody else to make the game. It's entirely possible. Who knows? WWE is a total mystery. But I, as a wrestling fan and as a wrestling video game fan, I hope for the best. I hope the game is amazing. Obviously, AEW has their game coming out. It's definitely not going to be this year, maybe next year, but I don't have high hopes for that game. They're really pinning everything they have on people's love of the Aki-style games, the No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, all that stuff. Some of those games hold up if you played them enough as a kid, and you have that just super strong emotional attachment to it. I can see you still enjoying that style of game, but for most people, there's not enough meat on the bone there, and I really don't want to see them coming out with a dud of their own. There could potentially, just like in real life on the ratings on television, there could be that real competition between two big wrestling companies, and that should carry over to the video game market as well. You would hope that maybe somebody is feeling like, hey, there's going to be a competitor on the market in a year or two. We got to kind of step our game up. So, we'll see what happens. My guess is the game comes out in October. I'll I'm sure I'll pick it up. You know, I typically do. I played a lot of WWE 2K20 despite how terrible it is, so I guess, you know, says a lot about me. I'm willing to put up with a lot of garbage to enjoy a wrestling game. And that's going to bring things to a close for this week. Typically at the end of every episode lately, I've been doing some kind of channel update stuff, and it's kind of been a big holding pattern lately. I've been working on kind of the next bigger video for the channel about odd and interesting arcade cabinets, and it's been just kind of like so close to being done and so close to being done in one way or another. You know, I was almost done with it, and I had bad research and had to rewrite the script and re-record voiceover and do a bunch of stuff. And then the other night, it was almost done, but then it just wouldn't export, but it is finally done, and I will have it up on Monday. So this video always goes up on Saturdays. On Monday, there will be the odd and interesting arcade cabinet video. I'm already in production on the next video after that. All the voiceover is already recorded for that. Script's done. I'm already in the editing process for that. I even have the next video after that queued up. I can't promise that they're going to be super fast like that. It does take me a lot of time to do some of the research on these things because I try to make sure it's accurate as possible. I'm not just going on to Wikipedia and, like, you know, rewording what I see on there. I'm actually kind of like trying to hunt down to make sure that, like, hey, am I pronouncing this right? Hey, is this really the way it, you know, this thing worked? You know, that kind of stuff. So it takes a little bit of time, but, you know, I enjoyed the kind of nitty-gritty details of it all, and I like doing that. Earlier this week, I did a vinyl pickups. It was the toy one, went well. I did some toy hunting and put a video up of that. So I went record shopping last weekend, plus I had some stuff given to me as a gift, and it was enough to kind of put together into a video. So that came out. Tomorrow, we're going out of town once again to go toy hunting. So if I have some luck, maybe there'll be another toy pickups video coming in the near future. I actually picked up some stuff at the Lego store tonight. And my plan with that is to actually stream some of the building process of that. One of the sets is an older set, but one of the sets is a much, much newer set. I think it came out within the past week. So if I have enough time, next week I will try to stream it. Like I said, you know, we've been doing a lot of work on the house. We were without electricity for part of the week this week, which, you know, obviously you can't work on stuff when that's going on, but everything's back super smooth. But in a couple more weeks, we have more work being done on the house. But after that, we'll be completely done. After I finish editing this video tonight, we start rearranging this whole room, and I will have a better setup for where my desk is, where I can film, all that stuff. I actually have a new webcam coming in the mail, so a nice upgrade on the one that I have. The one that I have is supposed to do 1080p. It doesn't, for whatever reason. Every time it tries to run in 1080, it just really craps out. This webcam I've had since 2010, 2011. I mean, I've had it for a while, so it'll be nice to kind of get the upgrade in there. So yeah, some cool stuff coming on the channel soon. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you on Monday for the arcade video, and I'll see you back here next Friday for Push Start to Listen.